Call the meeting to order, meeting of the Carver Board of Selectmen, Saturday, February 27th, 2016, a joint meeting with the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen to review budgets throughout the course of the day. Let's start with our Pledge of Allegiance. And now a moment of prayer. Helen?
Sure. Almighty God, humbly we pray your blessing as we concern our life with the opportunities to serve our community. Enhance us with your spirit of dignity and selflessness. May we become instruments of support and understanding as we seek to bring an environment of trust and purpose among all who provide the many services that make us all that we can become. Help us achieve the goals of our commitment in this office that is now our responsibility. And especially, we lift our prayers for all citizens of our community that we have been allowed to serve, that they may discover the fullness and joy of life that we all seek. And keep those serving in our armed forces and our first responders always in our hearts and thoughts. Amen.
A quick note that we're broadcasting with Area 58 Community Access Media today. Mr. Carter, would you like to introduce your board? And I guess you have to call your board to order as well?
Yes, I do. I'd like to take this opportunity, I have a quorum, to call the February 27th joint meeting between the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen to order. To my right, we have Mark Townsend, Andrew Cottarelli, Bill Duggan, and that's it. Sorry, we got a quorum of 4.
Excellent. We're glad to have our town accountant, Meg LeMay, with us today. And start with our own introductions. Alan?
Alan Dunham.
Sarah Hewins.
Ron Clark?
Dick Ward.
Helen Maroney.
Karen Pudria.
Michael Malinowski.
All right, well, thank you all for being here. This is sort of an annual tradition where we sit and meet with all the departments and have an opportunity. We've seen some of the numbers. We know what the roughed out numbers look like, but it's an opportunity for us to meet with the department heads, ask questions, and there's still time to make adjustments to the budgets if issues and topics come up that we feel are appropriate to so discuss. But I believe to get started, the town administrator would like to make a brief presentation to sort of set the rest of the tone for the rest of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will follow your lead in the definition of brief.
And please utilize the microphone so that you can be heard.
Okay, that is going to be a...
Want
Can
to
you,
steal my-
can you grab that one over there?
Yeah, that's true.
All right, let's get started. I've got a brief presentation. Some of this was given back in October of this year when the Board of Selectmen approved the overall budget for the town, which also included the spread between the general government and the school side of the town. But as you know, town meeting approved the town's financial policies. Everything that I do as directed by the policies, everything that the Board of Selectmen does, and the Finance Committee has to follow the financial management policies as approved by town meeting until those policies are changed in the future. And again, just to reemphasize, the policies really look at developing a sustainable townwide budget that provides the level of service we can afford within our known projected revenues. The key is, what are our known projected revenues, and then how do we use those limited resources to get the most services we can for the town of Carver. We're in the process of completing step 3 of the budget process and moving into step 4. Step 3 is the process for you to review the budgets with the different town departments after receiving the balanced budget, and then to make the final recommendations to step 4, which go to town meeting. Again, we've completed steps 1, 2, and 3, and this step 4 must be completed by March 12th, so that it can be publicized in the budget 30 days prior to town meeting, because those figures are the ones that have to go into the warrant. And based upon our new bylaw that was approved by town meeting, we now have deadlines as to when final budgets get done. This allows us to have the document in print for the public to review 30 days, and there's no more last-minute budget meetings to vote on the budget just before town meeting. So tied into our financial policies, which I mentioned we must follow unless those are changed by town meeting, then annually the Board of Selectmen put together their goals and objectives. And just to highlight a couple of these, the first one is to follow town financial policies. The second is to continue to deal with our largest unfunded mandate, or liability, I should say, with our OPEB trust funds. We continue this will be the third year in a row, to look at townwide shared budget accounts and determine what items should be in there from a townwide perspective versus an independent department standpoint. Look at having health insurance combined and have that part of the townwide shared budget. Look at the possibility of having a townwide facilities and what are the cost savings and efficiencies as part of that. I will say that in this budget, there is no proposal to combine the town facilities. We just received a report on that this past month, and there's a lot more discussions that need to occur with the school, the town, and to further explore that report before any changes are proposed to move forward. We're in the process of reviewing reorganization that took place with the planning department back in 2 years ago, and you are going to see some proposed modifications to that budget this year to address some of the needs that have been identified. We look at regionalization, and the town is continuing to focus its efforts on ongoing drug problems that we have in the town, and I think the police and the public safety have done a great job on that. And then obviously the capital outlay committee, looking at a new police station in the future following a strategic plan, is the next endeavor the town needs to do after we move forward with the completion of the new roof and boiler for the middle high school, on top of the fire station and the elementary school that's already being constructed. So beyond the financial policies, then this is the next policy statement that's incorporated in the budget process. From there, this is just kind of quickly looking at our real estate revenue coming in, and as you can see, it's somewhat been a roller coaster ride. And there have been some high years where we received some significant revenue back in 2006 and 7. But then it's more or less balanced down to something a little less than $100,000 is the tranche that we're looking at for new growth in real estate. Personal property is all over the place. We've had some high years in 2011 where it jumped up to $700,000. In 2015 it went back up to $427,000. We were projecting $147,000 for this year, which we were going to use for next year, but I was able to secure an additional 2 pilot agreements that moved that up to $233,000 for 2017. Of those funds, $100,000 was put into paying down the school deficit for building the new building. This is the state aid and comparison to what we've been receiving in past years. From a revenue standpoint, in 2015, we received $11.5 million. In 2016, that went up to 11.6. And this year it's gone down slightly by 22,000 to 11.61. Now that's the revenue side. That looks somewhat good, but that's not the whole story. Because if they give it, they take it. And this is the expense side of our state aid, where the expenses in 2015 were 488,000. Then they jumped up to 700,000. Now they've gone down a little bit to 647,000. What that means is for a net state aid in 2015, we had $11 million. Then we went down to 10.9, and now we're at 10.96. So we went up a little bit over last year, $31,000 over last year, but that's still down for the last 2 years. And again, that's the net state aid. You hear a lot about, well, what's the Chapter 70 piece? Well, the Chapter 70 piece is, in essence, the Chapter 70 revenue minus the education expenses. So our net education part of state aid has gone down 3 years in a row. It was 9.5, 9.42, and 9.38. So again, 3 years in a row that we've had a reduction in net education state aid. These are all key components going into our budget forecast. I'm not going to ask you to read this on the screen, but you have this in your document. I believe it's tab B. This is the 20-year forecast, or it's actually 10 of the 20-year forecast. Couple key components to this is in the top third of the document is the anticipated revenue coming into the town, which for this year comes in at $37 million. And then from there, minus our fixed liabilities, minus our transfers to other funds, minus other townwide shared budget details, that leaves us a total of $31.6 million in revenue after fixed expenses, to be then divided up with the new revenue over last year, which was $522,000, or the equivalent of 1.65% in new revenue. I want to emphasize that 1.65%. That's the new revenue we have. Healthcare is going up 8%. If healthcare is going up 8%, and we only have 1.65% of new revenue, that means other things need to pay for that higher percentage for healthcare. Bottom line, that gave us a school budget of $22.267 million and a town budget of $9.47 million. That was again approved back in October of this year. So in essence, those two numbers means the school has to balance their budget within that dollar amount, as does the town. This is the first year the school has actually, from the get-go, from their first approved budget, they've met that target number. So they have followed the financial policies, and that has been approved, and that's what has been submitted to the Finance Committee. And tonight we're going to be discussing the $9.4 million of the town share of those funds. The last thing I just want to point out on this, in the bottom 3 lines, and this is something that I think everyone needs to take credit for that's sitting at the table. Our OPED liability was $55 million. There have been some structural reforms that were done by the Board of Selectmen. That now brings it down to $43 million, so you have that savings on our overall liability. And even if you just carry that out 5 years, if you amortize that, that would be about a $30 million savings. So although you're saving $10 million now, clearly in 30 years that would have compounded had you not done this. And again, I think you guys need to take a lot of credit for that. Again, just real quickly, this is the revenue coming into $36.9 million. And the only thing I'll just point out on this one, this is what was presented in October. The only change that occurred here is we added $130,000 to the new growth, which was the 2 pilots that we did. But it doesn't affect the bottom line, because then that money gets added right to the capital budget, which goes into capital. So it, again, didn't affect the school or the town's number. It just is more money going into our capital reserve fund. And our capital plan that we put together, our 10-year capital plan, that revenue funds the annual debt of the town, plus what we can pay for as a as a cash project on an annual basis. So again, the capital outlay has a copy, and we'll be meeting in the next 2 weeks to go over their capital plan. So again, just going back to it, the town received 9.4 and the school received $22.26 million, and everyone has to live within that budget. So what does that mean? That means we have a balanced budget, but we're on what's called PAYGO. You may have heard that on a federal standpoint, but in essence, PAYGO means any changes in the budget, because it's balanced, increases or decreases, that's a pay, then requires something else is going to have to be cut. So if there's something that's changed in the budget, then we have to have find the corresponding cut to pay for that. Hence the PAYGO system. So again, that's where we stand. A couple components. Again, it's a balanced budget per the financial policies. The Board of Selectmen goals and objectives have been included. We're at 1.65% of new money. Again, that is not a lot of money. Healthcare is going up 8%. All step raises that are in the contract are incorporated in this budget. The bottom line is there's no surpluses that exist, nor contingencies included. The budget is tight. Obviously, we have the Finance Committee reserve budget, but this budget is tight, and it took a lot to put this together to try to address the services that the town needs. Some of these services are different than have been done in the past, but these services are services that need to be provided in order for us to have a viable and sustainable government. So I'm going to hit a couple things here, some of the challenges and opportunities that exist in this budget. Let me address two opportunities. We do have 2 retirements that have been announced for long-standing employees. Our town assessor is retiring in September, and our health agent is retiring this summer. So those are our opportunities, and whenever you have a retirement, it provides the opportunity to really take a hard look at those departments and see how well services were done in the past and how those can be improved or done differently in the future. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and some of the new positions or modifications of positions that are proposed in this budget. And anything that I'm going to be going through here, the finance component of this is included, and this is the recommended budget. So first, in the Planning, Environmental, and Permitting Office, as we said when we made that consolidation last year, 2 years ago, that we would continuously monitor that department and see if there were any changes that needed to be done. Last year, we added some additional resources to the building inspector's support so that that effort could be done. But what we've also found is that we got to a point where we had 1 full-time administrative person and sometimes up to 3 part-time people. We were finding that that system, it had too many part-time people, and when people would come in Monday and Tuesday and part of Wednesday and not come back to the following week, there's needs to keep the engine running, if you will, in the department, and taking those, in essence, 3 days off or 5 days off to refile a permit or to modify a permit was being problematic. So what this is going to propose is that we take one of the part-time positions and we expand that into a full-time position. Plus, from the union standpoint, those 2 part-time positions were at a grade 2. And, upon analysis, we're asking them to do a lot more work than is required in a grade 2. So we're proposing both those positions be at a grade 3. Again, those numbers are incorporated in the budget. The next item is human resources payroll benefits. It is very clear to us that we need to build an HR system. Unfortunately, it's something you just can't implement like that. It takes a while, because you have to come in and train department heads. You have to train departments how to do proper evaluations so that they withstand some of the complexities of municipal labor law, so that they're across the board on that. And we've been mentioning this for well over a year, that this is something that needed to be done in 2017, but we had to do it the right way. So when we look at our free cash, I am going to be presenting that some of that money be used to hire a consultant, one-time cost coming in to help us build this system up. But we do need to move forward and create a HR system. And this also will allow for review and better coordination between the school and the general government. And here's a great example of why this is needed. We just identified over the last month or so that there were 2 former school employees that were being paid for health insurance. Those positions were terminated about 2 years ago, but the town continued to pay health insurance to them. That was at a cost of about $38,000. Through Make Staff, we went back to Blue Cross Blue Shield. We're able to reclaw back about 60 days of that, which is about $5,000. Bottom line, there's about $33,000 that was in essence paid for an expense that we no longer have employees there for. So that money in essence was lost. With a more consolidated HR system, this will hopefully not allow for something like that to occur in the future. Clearly there were some mistakes made, and when mistakes are made, we have to figure out how they were made, and we have to put in mechanisms to make sure they're not made again. And my philosophy is I'm not going to look, and I encourage staff and others not to look back at, well, who did this, why they did it, how they did it. You know, we can always find out how it was done and why it was done, but now we need to look at how do we make sure that that isn't done again in the future, and look to the future to change that with new processes in place. The second item is the townwide procurement. We also need to build and expand the townwide procurement system to better protect the taxpayer resources. Here's another example. Everyone is aware of this. $48,000 were paid for computers that were installed in the summer. No procurement was done as required by the state law. The town accountant found this out 6 months after the fact. I was under direction by the town council not to pay the bill because there was no procurement done, and therefore it was an illegal procurement. As a result of that, and I underlined this because I don't think people realized how important this was, the Board of Selectmen, in essence, really saved the education program by utilizing donated money to pay for those computers, because we were going to have those computers removed and then go out to procure new computers, and that would have been somewhere between 60 and 90 days where there would have been no computers in the middle high school. So the selectmen were able to reallocate some solar money to pay for those computers, and thereby the students never saw the impact of that. There's a second example that appears to have not been procured based upon the initial review from the Inspector General in the OSD department, who's in charge of state contracts. Again, we need to do a better job on our procurement and also HR. So with these 2 challenges in the budget, what we're looking to do is to expand the role of the assistant to the town administrator, to expand her job description and responsibilities, so she would also be in charge of coordinating the townwide HR. And we're also looking to add a new procurement position, again, given some of these complexities, in an effort so we don't repeat the past again. So those are some challenges. With that, so this is the planning department. We've got our building inspector, our plumbing and gas, our wire inspector, and our sealers and weights and measures. These are all part-time positions. The building inspector does have a backup building inspector. We have our conservation agent, and we're proposing the health agent go part-time, or this gets contracted out, or this is regionalized, but we believe we can do this on a lower cost basis. We currently have the office coordinator. We're looking to upgrade 2 grade 2 positions to grade 3 positions, and turn one of those 19-hour positions into a full-time position. Obviously that adds benefits, but there's also some benefits that are being removed by taking one position to part-time. That's what the new structure of the planning department looks like, and Marlene will be talking about that during her presentation. The second is, with the assistant to the town administrator, is creating a new title for her to assistant town administrator / human resource coordinator, and then hiring a new procurement purchasing coordinator to come in and handle all of the procurement in town. I still have the responsibility of signing off for that, but I don't have, given the complexity of my job, being able to actually write RFPs and being able to do that on a daily basis. I need to monitor that, but have someone else go forward and do that. So that's the structure there. The next challenges that we have is with the fire department. You know, we have a wonderful department here that does a tremendous amount of work with a low budget item, but is a very high performing department. In the budget, you're going to see there's a need for additional management. You're going to see a new assistant deputy chief position. This position previously existed in the budget years ago, but due to budget constraints, was unfunded for several years. Unfortunately, I could not make the numbers work to fund that position starting July 1st. So in conversations with the chief, we're looking at having that position start in January 1st as a full-time position. So then when we get to the 2018 budget, we will have to have that funded on an annual basis. So in essence, you have a full-time position funded at half the dollar amounts, which would start in January 1st. The next item, and the major item that we have, and a DOR report was just released on this Thursday, is with the finance departments. And we really need to look at the challenges of performance accuracy issues with the finance departments. Some of that is mostly, I don't want to say, the large part of that is due, in essence, to the structure of the department, and also some of the training that has not occurred or people have not been exposed to in their roles. But what I first want to say is that everyone in the finance department does work hard. They try to do the best they can. They put in a great effort, and that effort is appreciated, but things are not working. And things have not been working on a continuous process. And with DOR coming in, we now have a new way of looking at how to make things work better and adjust the structure accordingly. So just to highlight some of the things, what we currently have today is we have 3 departments that are working, in essence, independently, and errors are not being resolved early in the process, and they're just being pushed along. So if one department makes an error on the valuation, and that information is entered into the system or not calculated properly, then that goes to the next department, tax bills are sent out, and then all of a sudden revenue comes in, and it's not the right revenue, and it just creates more work downstream. So that's an area that needs to be improved. And a lot of these things that I'm saying right now are in the process of being improved. I'm just highlighting and giving you full exposure to what has happened over the last year. With that, we went forward and hired external consultants to assist with training and trying to improve some of the performance and accuracy within the departments, and we actually gave them assignments to do some of the work to move the departments forward. Again, recognizing that not the town itself has not necessarily done the proper training of its employees so they can do the job we're expecting them to do. And again, that's on top of the structure. So we brought them in to do that. What we also identified is that everyone had their individual position and their responsibility, but many of the people didn't understand how their data was used in the next department. So we spent some time going through and providing information, and so that people can understand if they made a mistake, how that impacts the next department. So we took some time in doing that. So we identified lack of understanding what other departments were doing and why that accuracy and format is important. There was also some new software that was implemented last year. This allows us to have better accounting and more audit trails tied into the software, so we know when changes are made, who made them, when they made them, and under what authorization they made them. But with any new software, you always have some transition, issues. Some were software related, some were items that should have been resolved by the department heads, which created further issues downstream. well over 6 months ago, probably beginning in the summer, recognizing these things were not getting better, we began to have weekly finance team meetings. And then Meg started to take those over and facilitate those meetings to resolve financial challenges. And those have been successful in having people understand what the others were doing and trying to catch errors before they occur, and trying to have people take a little bit more ownership in what they're doing, and also train people. So they've been successful. They haven't solved all our problems, but they've been doing a lot of positive components. But as you all know, we've had multiple issues over the last couple of years. We've had delays in cash reconciliation for years. We're caught up, relatively speaking, right now. We're still working on the accuracy of that, but there has been some very positive improvements in that one item. You all know we received the DOR audit in 2011. Many of those things have been incorporated, but not all of them. Long story short is with DOR, they came through this fall and did interviews with all the appropriate departments. They did re-interviews. They compared Carver to some of its peer communities to look at best practices. This report was supposed to come out, or we'd hoped for it to come out at the end of December, which would have allowed us to start the budget process a little earlier. But DOR had some delays because they had a town go into almost receivership or bankruptcy that diverted all their staff there, and they've had a reduction in staff of 40%. So as a result, our project has been delayed, and we finally got the final draft document this past Wednesday, and that was disseminated to you. It's in your packets that you have right now, and I think you'll find that that's very informative in some of the things that it talks about the town. Some things that are being done well and some things that need improvement. The long story short is that there really are three components to this. The first is, instead of having three individual separate departments, this creates a centralized finance team under a finance director. That's major modification number one. So now the finance director / town accountant can facilitate and prioritization within the departments and make sure that everything is tracked appropriately. The second item is with the retirement of our town assessor. This allows us to follow what other towns are doing, because assessing has become more of a quantitative exercise and less of a policy exercise. And Department of Revenue has tried to develop standards in the process so that it takes out some of the personal bias out of doing assessments and valuations. So this is a process that this entire department, as it currently exists today, is proposed to be outsourced. And that would include the valuations and inspections. It does propose, in the budget, I propose to keep the 3-member elected Board of Assessors at this point. I think that provides the appropriate checks and balances and some continuity. But it does incorporate outsourcing the entire department, so all those positions would be laid off. We would have some transition taking us to the first quarter of next year, but come the end of September, we would be fully functioning under a new external contract for this as proposed in the budget. And then the third component is the treasurer collector's position. And what I'm proposing to do with that, the current elected treasurer collector's position term ends the end of April. What I'm proposing to do and recommending, based upon the new legislation that was approved, is to extend her in that position through the end of June of next year to assist with moving the department going forward, work on the training, work on, and under this new structure of having a finance director. And I'm hopeful that at the end of these 14, 15 months, that we will be in a position where we're going to have a more of a high-performing finance department that can take us into the future. Also, what was identified in the report is that from a staffing standpoint, our treasurer collector's office is relatively robust compared to our peer communities, and we'll be readdressing that over the next year once we work out some of these bugs. So with that, this is also going to include, since we're going to be outsourcing the entire assessing department, we still need to have some type of an assessing component within the town to handle some of the senior work-off programs, some of the programs that the town offers for reduction in taxes to certain people, and being a point of contact or liaison between the outside consultant and the taxpayers. So I'm looking to create a new position, a new principal assessor position, that will be at a lower position than what the director of assessing was, but still at a the equivalent of an equal level position as the assistant treasurer collector in the town, or the assistant accountant, just to give you a comparison. I'll show that in a second. And then also to create one-time part-time finance assistant. That person will be focused on accounting, but will also be able to assist the principal assessor. I'd hoped to create 2 part-time people, but the funding just wasn't there. So in my last slide, Mr. Chairman,
That's okay,
Michael?
we're only 1.5 departments behind.
Excuse me, Michael,
I just wanted to give you the opportunity for that.
are you done with challenges?
What's that?
Are you done with challenges?
I'm done with challenge. Let me just finish this slide and I'm done with
Okay,
challenge.
because I just want to make one point before you go on challenges.
Okay.
That I'd like to address at a later date.
Okay. So this is what the proposed structure would be for the finance department, and again, it's a finance team now. We'd have the finance director / town accountant reporting to myself, the town administrator, who reports to the board of selectmen. But I would have one direct report overseeing the department. We would continue to have our existing assistant accountant, and then we'd be looking to bring in a financial assistant part-time. This is a position that's been identified that we need. Then we move forward in having our deputy treasurer collector. This position, as I mentioned, I would propose to keep in place at least through the end of June of next 2017. Then under there, we have our assistant treasurer collector, our payroll benefits coordinator, and then our 2 part-time finance assistants. Then looking to create this new principal assessor position to handle a lot of the responsibilities. Again, the same grade as a treasurer collector and assistant accountant. I was hoping to fund a new finance assistant on a part-time level. Again, these would all be grade 3s, and these could all be cross-trained as needed, trying to build some type of a career ladder, if you will. But unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to fund this position based upon the finances we have within the town to live within the $9.4 million. So in a nutshell, that completes my challenges, and I think gives a good overview as to what you're going to see in the budget and hear from some of the department heads.
Real quick, there were 2 challenges that you mentioned that I was not, unfortunately, at the Board of Selectmen's meeting to vote on one of them, so I apologize. But it has to do with the procurement process regarding the computers that we spent a lot of money on, and the Board of Selectmen had to figure out a way to supplement that mistake. In addition to that, the $33,000 that the town lost because a school employee that no longer worked in the town, we were paying health benefits. And I know you're trying to be kind and saying, let's just move forward. I think we need to, I would like to have a conversation, because I think somebody should be being held accountable in terms of whether it be the management or the employee, or to determine whether it's an expertise issue, whether it was just recording issues, but I believe somebody needs to be held accountable, because it sounds like $33,000 isn't a lot of money, Michael, but in calculating that, that's 5 years of my taxes as a resident. So I would like to at another time have a discussion, but I really think somebody needs to be held accountable on that.
Could I, and I completely understand what you're saying, and this is the role that the Board of Selectmen and policy members should have to look into these things.
Yeah.
What I do want to say for the record is that with the new superintendent coming on, Scott Neef, I've had multiple meetings with him over the last month, and I anticipate and am extremely confident that many of these issues you're seeing here will not occur into the future. One of the things Scott and I have been talking about is that we all understand what the history was, but he's taking over now, effective
March 1st.
March 1st. And as a result of that, he and I are going to be having relatively weekly meetings We're gonna start having team finance meetings with the school and the town, and being able to address a lot of these items that were unable to be addressed in the past.
So that's a great start.
And again, we can all point fingers at what happened in the past. I'm looking to move forward. I wanna learn how they happened, because if you don't learn how they happened, then you can't make the appropriate adjustments for that.
Yeah.
And I know Meg wants to talk to you too, and I know
Yeah.
that she's working on doing some stuff as well.
And it's not pointing fingers, it's just realizing whether the persons in that position were trained well. And you know what I'm saying, so it's not pointing fingers, but accountability is huge on this one. This is finances, so I just wanna make that clear.
A couple of quick more comments, because I wanna,
Yeah.
we do have the
Keep
departments
going.
waiting.
That's why I said at a later date.
I was just gonna say brief, that's why we've been taking, like, on the meeting we had Thursday,
Yeah.
I'm really pushing for that combined
Yeah.
health benefits, because that way, as I said at that meeting, transparency would reduce the
Exactly.
risk of that happening again. If we go with the procurement, it's Michael's plan, that's gonna be taking care of a lot of these, so, we're taking the steps we need to
Great
take, I
start.
think, as a board.
And I just wanted to say too that whenever something like this happens, a lot of times it has to do with the fact that a proper internal control wasn't implemented. So when this occurred, my idea is how do we, mistakes happen, what do we do to make sure it never happens again? So what's happened is that Ann and the payroll coordinator for the town has been sending, with her monthly report that she sends over to the school payroll coordinator, it's a list of all the employees, and the school payroll coordinator has to review the list and then sign off saying that yes, all of those employees are still currently employed.
So you're already 100% ahead, like moving forward. It's
Yeah,
great,
moving
Meg.
forward, I
Yeah.
think we've addressed it,
Yeah.
so.
And I had no doubt. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael, thank you, that was a great presentation, sort
Michael.
of set the stage for where we're at today. Just wanna make a couple of additional comments, I wanna express some appreciation to the town employees. Since we implemented the capital stabilization fund, the personal property new growth, which, I think Michael indicated averages maybe 55,000 years, but we know occasionally that could be a bigger number. But if you take the figure of 55,000 a year over a 10-year period, that's adding over $500,000 to the town operating budget that is now being steered clear of the town operating budget. And in fact, we get those spikes every couple of years where there's 200,000 in personal property new growth or 300,000. So that over that 10-year period, that could even be $1 million expansion of the operating budget. We're not getting that extra little cushion now that helped us with the operating budgets. As a result, that's a natural pinch on the town operating budgets that means we have to try to provide the same level of service to the town for with essentially less resources, and that's why we're looking so hard at regionalization, greater efficiencies in doing the job, and as Helen points out, $33,000 is still a precious amount of money that we have to make sure that we can hang on to. So I do want to express appreciation to the town employees and the town department heads and so forth for working with us, because things are tighter now than they have been in past years as a result of that. And did also, for those of you that might have missed it, we had the town auditor in, and I just think that kudos need to go out to the town of Carver for adopting the policies it did, to the Board of Selectmen, to the Finance Committee, Capital Outlay Committee. The auditor stopped himself in the middle of the report to indicate that based on the way the town is being run now, we are a peg above our peers in the fiscal operation of this town. And in my time being involved in town government, I just have not ever heard that from our auditor. So I think that's something that we all should recognize, that while we have challenges, we're making progress. We're getting somewhere. And also I want to give John Carter credit, because John pushed very hard last year for trying to get the finances done a month ahead of time, so that we weren't having the race the day or two before town meeting and having the staff Xeroxing, there's an old term, copying thousands of copies of the town budget to hand out, and John really pushed that we should be done a month ahead of time. And while we're gonna be busy over the next, 2-3 weeks, it's gonna be nice to be sort of essentially done with the budget process. And then everybody at town meeting, if they get there and they have some questions as to this or that, if they had a month to look the stuff over. So I'll be a little less sympathetic with someone that didn't do their homework ahead of time. So with that, John, I don't know if you want to add anything before we finally get into the budget?
No, I just want to say that obviously working in the private sector, the municipal budget process and finance is it's a totally different animal than you might think. So I think, the credit goes to, everyone, all departments pitching in. As you said before, there's less money around right now to provide services with, and we're looking to save money wherever possible. So I think everyone's done a great job.
Okay, with that, and being almost 2 departments behind, because somebody forgot to include an introduction on the agenda,
That would be the chairman's responsibility, wouldn't it?
it is the chairman's responsibility, so I guess I'm gonna have to, but then again, I wasn't aware until I arrived this morning, there was gonna be an introduction to the budget process, so. That being said, the evaluation for the town administrator is coming up soon, so it can all be taken into account at that time. Could we have the police animal control folks step forward, please? And again, our apologies for being a little behind schedule.
So Michael, you just got a big compliment and then a big slap down.
Story of my life.
Good morning.
Good morning, chief.
Hi.
Thank you for having me this morning. If Chairman Clark and Chairman Carter will indulge me, I'd like to speak a little bit about the police department and where we've gone in the past year and where we might be headed. I will do my best to be brief. although I have to do a few pages.
Don't, the
Don't.
problem does not lie with you. Just look to your right.
Thank you. So again, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about our police department. I'm gonna read from my notes. I'd rather look at your faces and talk to you that way, but I've got a lot of important things that I don't wanna miss, so please indulge me and understand that. Specifically, I'd like to talk about what our officers have accomplished over the past year, and how the money that was allocated to our department was spent, and what we're asking for to conduct police operations into the next fiscal year. Before I begin, let me take the moment to thank the men and women of our police department, our public safety dispatch department, our fire department, and our EMS department for the excellent level of public safety service they have provided over this past year and will continue to provide in the future. I am very proud of all of them, and I think you all can be too. So during 2015, we were able to move forward in hiring 2 new police officers. After about 6 months in the academy, they began their field training in August of 2015, and then completed that in December. Both officers have now assumed their full-time roles on the patrol force. That addition, as we spoke about when we made the addition, has allowed us to do 2 things. First, to move forward towards the creation of a detective, which we hope to be doing in the next 6 months or so, and also to bring on a full-time school resource officer, Officer Mello, who began his duties full-time this September, and I think, as is seen by the work he's done, the school is loving it, the kids are happy to have him there, and he's done an excellent job. So that's been a good moving forward. Last year also, at the request or the suggestion of a couple of my officers, we solicited funds from several community groups to purchase some bicycles, which are going to be used in this upcoming spring to add bicycle patrols. Now that we have 3 people on some of the shifts, we'll be able to put bicycles out in some of the villages and some of the close-knit neighborhoods to get more of the community policing function that we like to do, to be out there to interact with the public better, and to also give us a different way of policing. People see police cars very easily, but they don't see police officers on bicycles so much. So we're hoping that will add to our ability to deliver good patrol function to the town and get more interaction. And so a little bit about what we did this year. The officers and dispatchers responded to about 9,064 calls for service in 2015, which translates to about 24 calls a day. These calls can range from assisting a citizen to investigating a break and entering, booking a motor vehicle collision to assisting with a medical call, making an arrest for drunk driving to processing a citizen for a firearms permit. So they run the gamut, some less exciting and some more exciting things that we get to do during the day. The opioid epidemic is still hitting our town very hard, as it is everywhere. We had over 30 overdoses last year and 6 deaths. We continue to conduct investigations into those who supply illegal narcotics to our citizens, and we were able to make several arrests last year, seizing drugs, vehicles, and money. We also expanded our role from merely enforcing the drug laws to finding new ways to approach that problem. Education is a very important piece of that. That's one of the things that our SRO, Officer Mello, has done, working with him, working with the schools, working with organizations like YPAC, and any organization that we can get out there and work with. We're working on trying to increase our education to our children and develop that relationship so that we can improve their ability to make good decisions moving forward and hopefully prevent them from going down that road. Again, that's not a statistic we're ever going to be able to quantify, because if they don't go down that road, we'll never know. But we're hoping, we know that will bring some positive results, and we want to keep moving forward on that.
Further, this year we'll be partnering with Plymouth and Middle Row PDs to provide a follow-up to those who are suffering from this addiction and experience an overdose. We've set up a program to follow up with them the next day, to bring with a police officer and a member of either High Point or Gosnold committee that can get together and bring some help to those people the next day, offer them a bed, get them into help. Because that's one of the next steps in this, is following up with people who are suffering from the addiction and trying to help resolve that so that we can prevent future problems. We take this issue very, very seriously, and we recognize the need to fight it on many fronts, and that's why we're doing that. We're doing our law enforcement function, but we're also expanding our role to other fronts to continue to battle that, to try to have more success in that fight. One of my most important roles is managing the town's budget, and I take that very seriously. For the past 2.5 years, we've identified some more effective and efficient methods of tracking financial matters. I now have spreadsheets for just about everything that we spend money on. These have helped me to more accurately monitor our expenses throughout the year and know where we are at each point. I really wish they taught an Excel class in the academy. That would have helped. One issue that's come up and has been successfully changed is the billing and collecting of our police detail charges. Working with Michael May, and we've identified several issues in that process, and we've put in place new procedures to, as we discussed, to ensure that those errors don't happen again. I do believe in people being held accountable, as you mentioned, Ms. Maroney, but we're going back quite a ways, and we can't find somebody to hold accountable to this, but we do, in the future, will be much more efficient and much more positive on moving that forward. The budget request that I'm presenting for this next fiscal year is only slightly larger, 1/3 of 1% actually, and represents any contractual step raises for employees, along with a slightly reduced operating budget. I know you all have copies, so I'm not going to go through that unless but I'll be happy to answer any questions on it. I am, again, as I've said in the past, I'm very honored to be your police chief and have your trust to lead this department and to manage this budget. I work very hard every day to maintain that trust by spending your money wisely, and will continue to do so. Before I take any questions, though, I'd like to speak a little bit about the future of our department. The support we received to increase our staff, we're currently at 15 officers and looking to fill a vacancy due to retirement, so that's 16, has allowed the department to become more proactive and move forward. It is now time to begin to look even further into the future as to where we should be heading. Along those lines, we are looking to form a committee to study the future direction of the police department, to include its staffing levels, its equipment requirements, and building needs. This is important for many reasons. For one, creating a strategic plan through a committee of officers, residents, public officials, and experts in the field can give us a written plan and direction towards the betterment of our police department. We're already doing an excellent job, but everybody can improve, and I'd like to codify that in writing so we all know where we're going and everybody can see that. Additionally, as we move forward toward the building of a new police station, that plan will help us in its design to make sure that we're designing and building a building that will accommodate those goals. So we'll like to set the goals in writing and then use that to define what we need to build for a building and what we need to spend for money on that. And finally, although there are many more reasons why a strategic plan is important, it allows us to gather information and input from our community as to where they see this department in the future and to ensure that we are serving the public well. So I'm hoping that through the use of that money, we make improvements in an already very well-run department. And that's kind of self-congratulating, but a good department, but we can make it better. With that, if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to.
And if I might just suggest to both boards, don't feel we need to go by ceremony and ask to be cleared through the chair. If you have a question, just go ahead and ask it. I guess I'll ask, how many employees do we currently have on the force if everybody was on the street? I know we have some people out on disability and so forth, but if everybody was healthy, then you had a full force. How many officers do we have, including yourself?
Include myself, 17. We have 16 police officers. Well, we're all police officers. 16 protects on myself, so 17 officers.
And how many do we have active as of right now?
Right now, we have 14 active, 1 who's out, and then 1 retirement, 1 open slot.
Okay. In terms, and you're waiting before, I know we just added a couple of policemen a couple of years ago. Before we, you ask for any additional officers, you're get involved with a study to determine future staffing levels and sort of get some feedback from that?
That, but also, as I mentioned before, when I first took over, there was a push to try to get 6 police officers. And I mentioned then, as you mentioned, we're a small department and we can't assimilate that large a number of new officers into our department very well. We don't have the the staff to train them to do it properly. So I need to keep that number to at least about 2 a year, max. Currently, we're looking for that, to fill that retirement slot, that's one. So I didn't feel comfortable at this point asking for new officers in addition to that this year, because I don't think we'd be able to do the job properly, but assimilating them into our department. But, not this fiscal year, but after that, I will look to continue to expand the department. The study that I'd like to do too would speak to what are the needs of this town, based on its population, based on its crime. Because I think we can all agree that 13 officers when I took over was way too little. But 30 is probably too much. So let's get to a place where we understand what number of police officers we need. The FBI says we need between 22 and 24. Let's assess that and see if it's true, and if that's what we need to get to, then let's make a plan. Again, as I've said before, we need to do that expansion as it's fiscally responsible and as it can happen. It certainly isn't something we can do overnight, and that is why I haven't put in a request this year for any new officers. I want to fill the slots that I have and then expand after that.
And just, I guess, one quick other question with the new elementary school. You've been involved in discussion from a security standpoint of the school.
Yes, I've been very happy to be part of that group along the way, and they've taken my concerns very seriously. You have to weigh that against what we have money to spend, but I think that has been done, and we're getting the best school security-wise that we could for the money that we have to spend.
Okay, thank you. Alan? No, Alan, remember, just call out.
I know, but I mean, basically, a couple of questions on the 2 overtime line items. I noticed your dispatchers, you've gone from 34,000 plus in FY15, 37,016, but you have no overtime request for FY17. But I do notice that the dispatcher's salary cost goes up over about 45,000. Is that overtime getting incorporated into the,
Yes,
as opposed to a separate line item?
yes, it should have been incorporated into a separate line item. I'm not sure why that isn't, although we are doing it a little differently this year than we did last. But overtime for dispatches runs around, I think it was 37,000.
Okay, so part of that cost that's in there, their total salary for this year should have been in the overtime line item.
That's correct.
Okay, and one other question, where we've got two,
Can I just want to deal with that for a split second? This is the first year we've used the new budget module for SoftWrite. So you're seeing different formats that are being done, and this is a different format than last year, is how it's consolidated. So you may run into a couple of these issues, and Meg and I will continue to be scrubbing it to make sure things are in a more transparent line item. We're not concerned about the dollar amounts, just as you said, it's
Right.
in the other line item. But you will see us trying to flush some of those things out in the future. But I just want everyone to be aware that this is a new module that we're using, and as with a new module, sometimes things aren't as bug-free as we'd like them to be.
well, that's fine, but that's just why I asked, just for the clarity standpoint. The other one question I had is where we've got 2 new officers on board now, would you anticipate eventually we may see a reduction in the police officer overtime? Because I see we're going up another, basically 5,000 in police officer overtime. And I know a lot of that overtime comes when people go on sick leave and vacation. But where we have 2 new officers already on deck now fully trained as of December, can we anticipate maybe seeing a decrease in the overtime costs?
We can certainly anticipate seeing a change in that, yes. But one of the things that I'm looking to do with the money that we have is that as we're moving away from having to pay overtime to fill vacation days and such, one of the issues we have is the level of training that we have. So we'd like to maintain some of that money to send people to training that we haven't been able to send before, instead of spending overtime on filling slots for just covering vacation days, which, like you said, will change. We may be moving into using a little bit of that to increase our training level. There are several programs out there to deal with active shooter training that we're going to start moving into,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to need to send officers to on an overtime basis. So I'd like to move some of that from filling paid time off requests to better uses for training and investigations. That said, I've increased it because we're not sure what we're going to see yet. But I do anticipate some change, and that's going to need to be monitored, and we're doing that. And by next year, we'll have even a better idea of where we're going on that.
No, I agree that using some of those funds to pay for training, I think is an excellent idea. And, at least you're keeping good control of it. It's only going up, we've only asked for an extra 5,000 this year, which is actually a much better lower increase than we've seen years past, so I do commend you for that, but I was just wondering.
Well, I appreciate that, but if you've seen from years past too, we've sometimes exceeded that line item. I'm hoping that we don't this year. I'm not gonna get into numbers on that, but we're on track for that. And as our controls and our watching of what happens is getting better, I think that we'll be able to better define that number in the future, and at least give you a better explanation of what we use it for.
Okay.
My thing is, within that number, there are some known liabilities, vacation days, personal time, known stuff that we're gonna have to pay, and there's a lot of unknown stuff, that's court time, investigations, training. And if we don't reduce that number, at least if we change what we're spending it on, because the known liabilities that we're spending on paying for days off because we don't have enough staffing, we're not really getting much out of that. Training and court investigations and court costs, we're getting something out of that. We're doing police work for you, and we're getting something. So I think that although we may not reduce that number much immediately, we are giving you more service for what you're actually paying that number for. You're not just getting somebody filling a slot that somebody took the day off and we're just putting another patrolman on the street. You're getting somebody who's either getting better training or going to court to testify on a case because they conducted an investigation and we arrested a drug dealer for it. So I think in line with what the town would like to see and like what the public would like to see, at least my impression of that is, if we're spending your money, let's be spending it on something that's giving us some quality police enforcement rather than just filling it.
Hey, thank you very much.
And I'd like to say too, when the chief, as he mentioned in his presentation, he's taking his fiduciary responsibility, the financial management portion of his job as a police chief, very seriously, more so than most of his peers. Recognizing that Carver does have an limited amount of resources, how do you best deploy those resources to get the biggest bang for your buck? And that's what he's doing. As he mentioned, he also has spreadsheets. He's being very modest because he has spreadsheets on every different level of detail. And as he mentioned, and how I evaluate chiefs is, they have known overtime and unknown overtime. The known overtime they need to budget for. The sick time, that occurs on a regular basis, the vacation, the court costs and everything. But it's the unknown piece. How are you using that? Is that being deliberately put towards drug investigation, to training, to purposeful uses that benefit the department? And he has those spreadsheets. He's monitoring them. He's learned how to use spreadsheets more than he probably ever anticipated ever learn how to do. But please believe that he is taking this to a level, as are the other chiefs in Carver. And that's one of the things that I'm most impressed about, is that everyone in the public safety is very conscious of their budgets.
I was gonna jump in next. I saw somebody over there, was it Andy? Somebody, well, Bill. Anyway, what I've seen with our police department is good attitudes and concerns for our town and our citizens. I've seen improvement in that over the last few years, especially under your leadership.
Thank you.
One of the things that when we go into this committee to study what our police department's needs are, and it's going to relate somewhat to our new station proposals or ideas, but also how long a kind of projection would you like to see happening when you do this study? In other words, what do you see as concerns that you need to put a little emphasis on for our future 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years? They must be going to look at 5 years, because that looks like it's going to be, we're not going to get to the new station until we get to that point or further. Hopefully we get it as soon as we can. But I was concerned with where our town goes and what you think our police department needs that might be you're going to have to study.
Well, it's a great question, and as I said before, we want to do everything in a fiscally responsible manner, and I'd like to build the station as quick as we can, because I think if you go into my station, you'll see that it's pretty much deteriorated, and we need to do that.
Very
That
much
being
so.
said, we can only do what we have money to do. But I think this study will be a way of looking at the whole picture and assessing what we really do need to be moving forward on, as you said, quicker rather than sooner. I think in addition to building a station and building a station that's appropriate for the department, we've got to define where this department's going and what the town expects for services. And I'll say that we made a big push, obviously, that we're really fighting hard on the drug front. But aside from that, we still have other issues, quality of life issues, speeding cars and barking dogs and other things that are not as in the forefront of our mind for what the problems are. But we got to sit down and decide, okay, to be able to attack all those issues, we need either more police officers, or we need to decide where we're going is what's important enough to put money towards and what's not. So I think that that's a key part of this. But I also think internally to our department, we need to look at our staffing levels to include our management levels. We're a small department. We're run with police officers, police sergeants, and then a chief. That scenario does not allow for the best supervision all the time, and there's no ability inside the department for several people who are patrolmen now to look to what's my future here, where am I going?
Right.
And so we've got to look at other departments and industry wide and see, should we structure the department a little bit differently to allow for better supervision, which means less liability, and give the people who are working in the department some idea of where their career growth might go in this department. I think one of the biggest things that I can be looking forward, or I should be looking at this point, and I'm in no means hoping this happens soon, but at some point I'm going to retire. I'm hoping that's 10 years from now at least. But we need to start thinking now about growing people within the department to replace me and to replace our sergeants and maybe different command staff level people in the department.
We must have a few people looking at retirement
But we do.
in not too distant a future.
We do a lot. We have several that are, a couple that are in the next 3 or 4 years, and then we have quite a few who are my age that may retire all at the same time. We'll be able to retire all at the same time. So we need to maybe be making plans today for that future event, because I'll be 55 in 9 years, and that means that I'll be eligible to retire, and many police officers within our department will. So we need to be working on the people we're bringing in, giving them opportunities to learn and to grow, so that when that time comes, we have people to take over those roles. And it would be, I think, a big plus to be able to do that internally with people that we've trained, that we've spent time on learning Carver, learning the requirements of Carver, and learning how to be a police officer within Carver. So I think that's an important thing. Also, I'd like to look more seriously at where our crime rates are and our crime stats are, and what do we need. Again, we're talking about creating a full-time detective. I think that really we have the ability to use a full-time detective and a full-time detective sergeant to run that unit, and pull somebody from patrol to do that, because I think there's enough follow-up that could be done by those people that we should think seriously about that. But that's something we need to assess as a town moving forward. Do we want to expand? Do we want to change our patrol role to include more of an investigative function? But those are issues that
You may have changes in neighborhoods and such that could happen with more pressure. Yeah, good.
I hope that answers your question.
Yep, it does. It's more specific. I like that.
The FBI,
We gotta get a microphone down that way.
officers, what's that, they base that on, you talked about that,
They base it on, yes, it's a number per thousand. It's
per thousand?
with that number equates to approximately 11,500 instead of 22.
Crime in the community too, I mean, if we're all good citizens,
Yeah, and that's anybody can give you a number per 1,000 on what you should have, but you've got to also assess the actual crime level in your community. So if you're just going on a raw number, that's what they say we should have. So part of this study committee that I'd like to have is to look at our crime stats over the past few years and see what do we really have here in Carver that we need to be focusing on, so that we make sure that the number we decide we're going to move towards is a valid number based on Carver, not just based on what the FBI says.
Bill, could you pull the mic closer to you? We get a lot of complaints.
As far as it goes.
So that's it?
Stick your neck out a little more there, Bill.
just being here. Has there ever been any communities that dealt with, like ex-military that helped with the police to kind of, citizen participate, I mean, you tough, but if you've got
Massachusetts.
military or ex-police background.
Massachusetts, I would assume you're talking about ex-military volunteering to help with that. Massachusetts is a little bit different in the way they do policing, and that's not a big focus here. I'm not sure throughout the rest of the country if it is. But the Massachusetts civil service system that we work under focuses on hiring people through a process, and in that process, former military members, veterans are given preference on the list. So that's how we absorb them into departments within Massachusetts and Carver in particular.
Well, the new school and stuff, as far as security and stuff, it's.
Well, again, that's,
something-
our proposal is to continue to have a school resource officer there who's armed and ready to help to keep the students safe. We don't have any, I've never had anybody come up and volunteer for that, although I've seen other people throughout the country who volunteer to stand in front of schools to protect kids. We don't have that type of situation here, and we have Officer Mello in the school who's there to do that right now.
Other questions?
Yeah, just a couple, Chief, please. One was, not to bring back the overtime issue, but, we have made the argument in the past that if we put on more officers, hopefully we'd see this overtime start to come down. And I am looking at the financials saying that in 2015, you had about $280,000 in overtime. $250 last year, you're budgeting $255 right now, which I don't know if that's just a fluke, getting more officers is having an impact on reduced overtime. But I'm looking at the financials through January, and it looks like based on where you're going, you're spending about $17,000 a month, and at the end of the year, you might be at like 210, 220, if nothing else happens, if you just keep on this track. So.
And I didn't bring those numbers up, Mr. Carter, just because, as we know in my field, a great snowstorm this week could screw that all up. So I agree with you. I'm very happy when I look at my numbers this year as far as where we are, and that comes down to my spreadsheets we talked about. I can track every time. I know where we're at, and I'm very happy for that. And I'd like to see that trend continue. But if I sit up here and tell you it's gonna and it doesn't, then people are gonna be mad at me. So
No, I think you
and
deserve
I
all the credit for that,
blame-
yeah.
But I think, yes, we are on track, and to incorporate Mr. Dunham's question into it, that's a good thing, and I wanna see that trend move forward, but I don't wanna ask for less now and then find out that we couldn't hold that.
No, I understand, but I would just say, if you feel that you're in a position some year to ask for less, and you just, your gut's telling you, your spreadsheets are telling you that the reserve fund obviously is there for support, should something come up that, you weren't counting.
Well, I appreciate that, because I
Yeah.
guess maybe I didn't have a full understanding what the reserve fund's for, but until I see these numbers hold for a little bit longer, I'm still a little not skeptical, but I just wanna see it happen.
That's fine. And just two questions on your, the detailed payroll schedules that I'm looking at, and I'm seeing a reduction. I'm seeing a reduction in 2 officers between 16 and 17.
I'm sorry,
That's the one we got today.
Yep.
Just curious as to why.
Senior officer pay, they're coming up, that's the issue.
Okay, a reduction in why the number is, yes, they were on a plan called senior officer pay where they select some time, and that's changed so that's why they're reduced. I didn't understand the question.
Oh, no problem. And last question is the contract over? Contract been renegotiated? Are they working without a contract?
Currently, the contract is expired, but we are in negotiations for a successor agreement.
Thank you.
Can I drill down on, hi Chief, truthfully, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, can I drill down?
Grab the, as long as you grab the mic, Andy.
I wanna drill down on some budget items, since we're here to review the budget. Chief, you have budgeted $3,000 for weapons, as of January, you haven't made any purchases for weapons yet this year? Is that true?
No, that's not true. We do, well, there's an issue in that we bought 2 tasers and they got classified in the wrong one, so that's under that.
Okay. Are there plans to, how often do you have to, you've 2,500 for next year for weapons, how often do you have to replace weapons?
Well, the 2,500 for next year is, we'll be up to stock on our tasers. We would like to have 1 extra in case we have a problem. And we are not up to full complement of patrol rifles for the cruisers. So I'd like to bring that up. We have 2 new officers on, both who are ex-military and would like to have patrol rifles in their cars. But I'd like to try to purchase those next year.
Okay, I didn't know if we were just talking about handguns or.
No, we not last year, the year before, we had an article to purchase new handguns and new equipment. We've done so, they've worked out excellent. As a matter of fact, while we're on that, just take a quick moment. We've also, the new firearms that we purchased have the capability, as technology's increased, to incorporate a light onto the lower frame of the firearm. Last year, at the end of the year, we used some money to purchase those lights. I tried to get, actually, the insurance company to give us money to buy it. But the purpose being is that if we have to point a firearm at something, we, especially since 2/3 of our officers work at night, we have the ability now to effectively light that up instead of trying to hold a flashlight in one hand and a firearm in another. You have it incorporated into the weapons. So we are moving forward with better equipment. People don't like to talk about guns all the time, but we are moving forward with better equipment that will help our officers to be safer and will help to reduce the town's liability for an accident.
That's terrific. My other one is on, I have a few bullet points here. My other is on ammunition. You've budgeted $3,000. You have expended, as of January, 2,530, leaving you $469. Do you see yourself needing, going over that budget for the rest of the year until the fiscal year ends?
No, I don't. We're sufficiently stocked for the remainder of the year. But again, we don't over-purchase ammunition for just to sit in a closet. We purchase what we're gonna need for training. You know, and fortunately, we don't use a lot of duty ammunition. We use more training ammunition throughout the years.
Okay, and the other one is vehicle maintenance. You have 15,000 budgeted for this year, expended year-to-date, as of the end of January, 13,300, leaving you 1,688. Wouldn't that leave you short a little bit for maintenance until?
No, we should, the number's actually a little higher, it's 13,600 and change
Yeah.
today. But no, because we've gotten a lot of the maintenance stuff out of the way. I mean, obviously, the nice part about the plan so far is we've had no loss of engines and loss of transmissions, big money items that we've had to change. So barring something like that happening, we should be fine.
Okay. Okay, I mean, the only other point I have is, and I couldn't find it in the budget here, is the operating supplies. You had budgeted 2,000, and you have expended to date 3,559, leaving you over almost 900.
And that's where, I talked about that misclassification of the tasers. They get classified somehow as operating supplies, they should actually be under weapons.
Okay.
So there was I don't remember the price, but I think it was $2,000 that was,
Okay.
that's incorrect.
And in the budget, I didn't see a line item for operating supplies. Is it under something else?
No, it should be right in there. Let me just check.
See office supplies.
Operating supplies, yep, it's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 up from the bottom on the second page.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong, I'm just looking at the other one. Okay, oh, I see it, okay, I got you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? If not, Chief, thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
that.
Thank you everyone for your time.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
And as we approach 10 o'clock, we'll bring up our 9 o'clock appointment. Again, to the department heads that are here, we appreciate your patience. And we will have Deputy Jermaine from the Fire Department. Good morning.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
How are we doing today?
Well, you?
Doing well, thank you. First off, obviously, good morning, and I'd like to start with an apology from the fire chief, Chief Weston. He was unable to attend today, and he asked me to attend in his place, so you're stuck with me. Hopefully that's okay. Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with just a brief overview of where we are with the fire department today. We're happy to report that our fire department is running strong. We have a 73-member team, and we are running on all cylinders right now. You know, that's par for the course. That's something that we expect. Firefighter morale is high. Firefighter participation is very high right now. And as you all know, we run a call system where our folks, they work, 40, 50, 60 hours a week at their primary jobs to make ends meet. And then they come and work for our community for, a little bit of money. And then they try and juggle their family life in between that. So to have the type of participation that we're seeing now is very refreshing. And it's fantastic. Right now, our average response time for an apparatus on scene is 5.9 minutes. And our manpower, which is obviously one of our very strong suits from our call system, we average roughly 16 firefighters in the middle of the day. So that's between, say, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. We put an average of 16 firefighters on the apparatus and at your emergency. And again, we do that in 5.9 minutes or less. That's an average. After 4 p.m., we average 30 to 40 to 50 firefighters after that 4 p.m. mark. So obviously, that daytime is our critical piece with that 16. I will tell you, we're very proud of that number. There is not a career department around us that can put those types of numbers together, that we rival their runtime numbers, and we exceed their manpower numbers, hands down, in a call system. And so that's something, and again, we do that at a very low cost. You know, our claim to fame and our mantra is we want to provide an A-level, level A service, best service we can provide at the lowest possible cost. And we feel that we do that year in and year out. Our run totals are up a little bit for this year in comparison to last year. Some people can look at that as a good thing, some people look at it as a bad thing. One of the things that we're very proud of is our public education campaign that we provide to the community, whether it be to the children, the school children, or our seniors. We had more requests last year and fulfilled more requests for public education programs than any other year since I've been here. And that speaks volumes to our reputation in the community, the need and want for public education. And again, that's something that we're very proud of. So we enjoy that very much. I think, obviously, the bigger projects that we're working on right now, if you open the blinds and look out the window, off in the corner here, you'll see a new fire station that's well under construction. We also have another very large project of fire apparatus being built at the very same time. I'll tell you that those projects have taken an enormous amount of time between the chief, myself, all the internal committees that we formed, made up of our firefighters and townspeople, to get those projects off the ground and to get them where they are today. The fire station project alone, the chief is all day long, it's constant. And it's really management and oversight, and it's something that we're responsible for, seeing as the taxpayers of our community having made such a substantial investment in us, in their fire department in the last year. We take that very personally. We thank all the town committees and boards for their participation in helping us get this far. Most of all, the taxpayers have really, they've funded their fire department. They've made a substantial investment in us. And it's our duty and responsibility to make sure that these projects come in on time and on budget, which they both are at this point. And we will, as a community, have the very best fire station and the very best fire apparatus that can be built for the money that has been allocated to us. I promise you that, based on Chief Weston's work ethic and his attention to detail and his oversight. It's incredible to watch what he does and how he does it. So those two projects are obviously in the works. The fire apparatus is due to be delivered sometime in April, and the fire station is due to be completed sometime in September. In saying that, again, this has been a very busy time for us. Once the fire apparatus arrives, it will become even more busier, where they will arrive, and then comes the challenge of putting those pieces of equipment into service, which will be done by the men and women of our departments. They'll spend hundreds of hours mounting things, getting the trucks in service, training on those vehicles. They'll do all that with donated time that doesn't cost the taxpayers anything. And we'll make sure that it's done right. And so, really, the firefighters of our organization, they're the people that really make this machine work. So there's a lot of work that's going to happen in the next few months just with the fire trucks themselves. And then once the station really starts to come to fruition over there, when it's time to start talking about moving, it'll be an enormous feat to bring what we need to bring from this building to that building. And to move it all in, and then to adapt our programs to work efficiently in that new building. That new building is going to bring us, and I know I get a little off track, but I remember when that lot of land was given to us by the town for training purposes way back when I was a young firefighter. And our training prior to those old dilapidated buildings was almost non-existent. And Alan, I know you can remember that. Those old dilapidated buildings brought our fire department into brought us to a level that you can't really understand unless you've lived it and been there and watched other communities around us fall behind. And basically, again, it was a piece of land with 3 dilapidated buildings. We made that our own. We made it to work for our community. We fit it to our fire department. And we are the envy of many fire departments around us, and they come to visit to use those old dilapidated buildings. So with this whole new complex going over there, the sky's the limit. We know that a new training building that we're building behind that new fire station is gonna bring us to an even bigger level. And we're very proud to be a part of that, and can't wait to see what it looks like in the next 10 years and where we move. So those are kind of the big ticket items. Any questions on any of that infrastructure? Anything
Questions?
before we move right into the budget?
The training facility, gonna be in back of the station there?
Correct.
Will that be available to other towns as far as the town, leasing, making money on?
Sure, so what we do, what we've done historically is, again, those buildings, even what they were, they're very desirable for other communities because nobody had anything like that to train with. So basically what we do is our surrounding neighbors, we have a handshake deal where they'll come in and buy the supplies that they use. They have to have some of our training people there to make sure that they use the buildings correctly, don't damage things, and they take care of it. And really, there is really no monetary dollar value that goes back and forth. But take, for instance, Duxbury Fire. They use our training facility. They've donated 2 whiteboards to our new, 2 smart boards to our new fire station. It's kind of a, I wash your back, you wash mine, and I think when you start to charge a fee or a service to use the building over there, you run into a legality where you're obligated to supply a service. And in addition to that, at least philosophically, from the chief and myself, the taxpayers of the town of Carver, we as taxpayers, are spending our hard-earned money to build that facility, and we have to find a way to maintain that facility and keep it looking and working well 50 years into the future. The more you use it, the more people you bring in to use it, the more entities that use it, take years off that lifespan. And I just don't see as taxpayers, us coming back and saying, hey, we need another building in 10 years because we've used it so much that it's outlived its useful lifespan. So the question is, yes, that Olive Branch will still go out to our neighbors. That is a work in progress as to how exactly those deals will work out, but it probably will not be, bring your organization in, here's the building, go ahead and train. There'll be definite oversight by our people, and again, between the town administrator and our chief, there'll be some deal worked out where do we charge, do we not charge, and things like that.
Is there any
Bill.
liability to the town for other people coming in?
Well, let me just jump on that, Bill, because the chief and I have had many conversations on this. When you get into renting the facility, you do run into additional liability that you have to have protection for that. But it does create some internal issues as to how do you charge for that. What is important, as the deputy mentioned, is maintaining a close working relationship with our surrounding towns so that we can make sure that they're trained just as well as we are, so that when we need them for mutual aid, that we have high confidence in them, and this is some of the bartering system back and forth. Beyond the smart boards, I am aware and have been involved in several instances where other departments will donate materials to Carver and supplies that we would normally have to go out and purchase, and therefore that is a way of actually sharing in some of the cost of that. As you know, Carver uses a lot of foam to fight its fire apparatus and structural fires because we don't have a water supply in town. That foam is expensive, and on a regular basis we do get donations of foam from other departments to help keep our stock up, which means then we don't have to buy that. So I don't think we want to get into renting the facility. I think that would then put too much administrative burden and liability burden on the town. But we do want to make sure that our surrounding communities that cover us in mutual aid have the opportunity to work with us, and we can work with them.
Just a quick question. If our personnel have to be on site when do the other towns pay for the hours of our personnel?
Not normally. Again, our people don't make that much money. We usually pick that up. One of the things when you talk, for instance, for instance, Plymouth Fire is running a dive course right now, and actually they're running it right here in our town at a piece of property that Chief Weston owns. They brought in a company called Lifeguard Systems. I believe they paid upwards of $7,000 for a course. And 5 days ago, they made a call over and said, do you have anybody in the department that wants to attend this course for free? So we have 5 of our people in this course that was free to us, that Plymouth Fire is paying, like I said, upwards of $7,000 for. So it's that type of camaraderie and back and forth. Those are the things that build bridges and bonds, and like the town administrator said, the training aspect, the bond of training. Once you train with your fellow firefighters in their communities, the mutual aid aspect just is seamless. And that's
One thing you might want to do is to make sure that when you strike a deal that another town's going to use the facility, ask them to provide a certificate of insurance.
Okay.
Just so that it's clear that they're accepting responsibility while they're over here.
So we normally have a liability form, a standard liability form that they do sign.
Okay.
That usually comes from the chief of department, whatever department that is. So we'll definitely follow that.
I was just gonna say, that mutual aid term is extremely important in the fire protection area. I mean, we need to have towns ready to jump over and help us, or vice versa.
Absolutely.
More than probably any other department that we have.
As an example, for mutual aid purposes, last year, we sent mutual aid out 21 times, out of our community. We went 21 times to different communities, and we brought mutual aid in once. So that kind of goes to show you, when we talk about statistics and manpower and how other departments can't compare to our 16 during the day and our 30 to 40 to 50 at night, they just can't do that. They have 4 people on duty. When you go, and I'm not gonna use names, but when you go to one of our neighboring communities, there's 2 of them. If you have an emergency in that community, when you call the fire department, you get 4 people on the first 2 pieces of apparatus. After that, they're dependent on callbacks, and if they have call people, they call people. There's 4 people on duty, and their budget is in the millions, $2 to $4 million for 4 people. So it kind of puts it in perspective when you say we have 75 members in our department, and our budget is now $500,000. What level are you willing to live with for the money?
I gotta say that the reason that I and many of our town officials are so supportive of the fire department and the things that you need for all our volunteers is because there is such a good attitude with the volunteers, and there is such a good work ethic of our whole fire department. And we all see this and we say, well, you know, a new station, new equipment, modern equipment, good technology is gonna help them, and we know our fire budget is much lower than most of the other towns around us because of this. So that's why at least I, and I know many of my fellow town officials, are so supportive of you guys. So you do a great job.
Thank
and
you,
we
guys.
like that.
Absolutely.
I just wanna go ahead and touch on one thing, 'cause I believe this year capital, request is for, you have SCBA for 225?
220, correct.
Right. How, I know we put it, the fire department put in for a grant for that. Any word back on that grant yet?
Yeah, so this would be, unfortunately, it's kind of embarrassing. This is our 3rd attempt at a FEMA grant for the same equipment. We're looking for
And again, what was the equipment?
a self-contained breathing apparatus, which is the whole apparatus, the air bottle, regulator, all those things that we wear to give us protected breathing in. So this is the 3rd attempt at a FEMA grant to secure that funding without having to go to the taxpayer. Unfortunately, our apparatus right now was purchased in 1996, so it's 20 years old. It's failing at a rate that we just can't, it's just unsafe for our people to use. Our last service, which was done 3 months ago, the bill was extraordinary this year because of all the repairs that had to be made. And some of the air packs had to be taken out of service completely just because we just can't invest that kind of money in them. So the only real option here was to, A, submit the grant once again. We retooled it. We spent a lot of time with it. We feel good about it. That grant is for about $230 some odd thousand. And the second 2-pronged approach, the second prong was to, if the grant doesn't work out, and we won't know before town meeting, if the grant doesn't go, we need to go to the taxpayers and ask for this equipment. So we brought that price down a little bit from $236, I believe it was, to $220. We're gonna try and do without some of the pack tracking equipment and things that we would get with the FEMA grant, and not put on the backs of the taxpayers.
Well, I brought that up basically to show that this department makes a huge use of federal grants that they're always applying for, and they have saved the town over the years hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I know that, that process is going forward again, as I said, trying to get the new SCBA, so that's another thing this department does to actually make money for the town of Carver.
I think we looked last year, and it was over a million something that, in grant money that we've received in the last, I think it was 10 years. Right now, that process that you asked about, Alan, the grant process, what they do is they have a peer review. It goes through a computer first, and it's a competitive from all over the country, so it's a competitive grant system. They feed everyone's grant into a computer. It spits it out, yes or no. The yeses all go to Maryland. They fly into Maryland, and then they fly fire service personnel from all over the country to Maryland. They did that last Monday, and they ended on Friday, which was yesterday. 5 days of hundreds and hundreds of people just reading thousands and thousands of grants. So that's called peer review. Peer review ended yesterday. We're hopeful that they will start awarding grants within the next month and a half, and then we should have some sort of an idea after that. Usually we can tap our little partner in Boston. We have a FEMA partner that we can sometimes get some information from beforehand to say, hey, what do you think? And they can give us some good guidance.
We had to plan a relevant of the grant, and obviously we hope we get the grant, because then we won't have to spend some of the capital outlay and debt stabilization money, but it is a funded item within the balanced budget for the capital outlay. Again, it's needed, we put it in there, and it has to be purchased. If we're unsuccessful in this grant to the national competitive process, then we have taxpayer resources to buy the equipment. If the grant comes in, then we can reallocate those funds to other priority projects.
Eric, I wanted to thank your department and all your call firefighters, not just for the money that you save us, but that is appreciated, but in particular for your service.
Good. I want to make sure that everybody understands when you guys say that. We take it personal. That means a lot to us. And I know you say it, and we hear it. But most importantly, our firefighters hear that, and it means a lot to them.
Incredible.
A lot, when the Board of Selectmen and the different committees in town say thank you,
Yeah.
they listen, they hear that. So we appreciate when you say that.
It's incredible.
Just want to talk, Alan, you talked about capital outlay. The other capital outlay expense that you see on there is a $15,000 expense to make renovations to our Station 2, which is the North Carver Fire Station. That was built in 1980, what, Alan? Can't remember. It's, early 1980s. It's in desperate need of a makeover, and so we have some very talented people at Station 2 that have presented a project to the chief. I know the chief has spoken to the town administrator about that project, and they figure that's the cost to purchase all the materials that are needed, and all the time and expertise and talent is going to be donated by the members of Company 2. So that's that $15,000 you see under the capital expense. As far as the regular budget goes, what you see in front of you is a level service budget. It, as always, it's a lean budget. It is, and I know that everybody knows this, but the budget is made from people who are taxpayers in the community. We all live in the community, we all pay taxes in this community. It makes us frugal. We feel the pinch when everyone else feels the pinch, so we know what it's like. The approach to our fire department budget is the same as it has been since back in the Dana Harriman days, where we don't ask for anything we don't need. And we always take taxpayer money to heart. I mean, we know where this money comes from. And I know the town administrator used the phrase earlier, but our main goal is to get the biggest bang for our buck, for your buck, and do what we can do within those constraints. And so we think that this budget represents that, as we try and do every year. You'll see a very slight increase in our operating budget of $2,000. Those were a couple things. The chief wanted to increase a line item for uniforms, uniform allowance, and that was, we have Class A uniforms that are used for formal engagements, firefighter funerals, things like that. And we have an honor guard that represents the town and fire department in those engagements. And sometimes we have firefighters who just can't afford all of the materials to make those uniforms happen. And so we increased that by a little bit to try and help those firefighters get those pieces of the uniform to represent us well. So it ended up being a $2,000 increase to that operating account. The firefighter salaries account, you'll notice, had a larger increase, and that is in line with Mr. Milanowski's presentation earlier on the board in regards to a fire deputy's position that was vacated about 8 years ago by Deputy Mark Weston when he retired. At that point, I don't know if people can remember back to 2008, but the town was in a pretty rough budget process, trying to navigate some rough waters. And there was some give and take there, and Chief Weston agreed to not fill that position in an effort to try and stabilize some of the budget woes that were happening townwide. So I know that every year the chief contemplates filling that position. He has for the last 8 years. And I know that he came in front of the boards and let you know that it was still on the rolls and that it was his intention at some point to refill that position. And after a lengthy debate and a lot of hard decision-making, he has decided that this is the year that we want to do that. The administrative duties and all of the workload that goes along with running a call fire department. And believe me when I say it is much more labor intensive and more difficult to manage a call firefighting system than it ever would be to manage a full-time career system. It just is. Career systems, you pay them a paycheck, they come to work and they make money, or they stay home and they don't make money. It's their choice. For us, it's our job to motivate our people, 75 people, to want to come and do what they do, put their lives on the line in some instances, and do the jobs that they do every day for little or no money, and that's basically what this is about. So those duties, whether it be code enforcement or just admin duties, all the different things that have increased over the years, the two of us are at a level that we just feel we cannot sustain much longer. We're starting to see kinks in the armor, if you will, and the chief is definitely afraid of burnout. When you look at the hourly breakdown for each year for the last 10 years, the chief has averaged about a little over 700 hours of over and above a 40-hour work week. Myself, I'm about 600 hours over that, so we're both kind of working crazy hours. And again, not to get personal, but things suffer at that point, whether it's the department that suffers, your family that suffers, you name it. After that amount of time, doing those amount of hours, it's starting to really get difficult. So again, the chief feels that this is the year to do it. Between him and Mr. Milanowski, they came up with a half-year plan to make it more palatable to the taxpayers and to the budget process. So again, we would look to have it approved in the budget, and we will start the hiring process in July, hoping to fill the position on January 1st, somewhere in that area, and that would account for a half-year's salary for that person. And then the following year, we would obviously be a full year's salary, and hopefully be able to absorb that into the budget. Trying to think if there's anything else I had in my head on that.
There's one other thing here too that I just want to address is in the budget process this year, particularly for public safety, where we have people budgeted at 40 hours, you are going to see a couple nomenclatures for that. The other 5 hours was in essence in the budget in certain other spots, and what we've done is with the deputy chief and the chief, we've moved that up into the actual line item for those positions. It doesn't necessarily represent a change in value, it just means that it's more appropriately placed in the budget. So again, no change in value, it's just that it's moved from several subcategories into the appropriate category. So when you see that change, that's the reason for that.
Any other questions?
Just, I'd like to say one more thing, and I know the chief really doesn't, he'll probably kill me.
We won't tell.
So, he's a very modest person, very humble, and, but I will tell you, you know, in order to make this new, it's not a new position, in order to refill this vacant position, and make it palatable, the chief, along with, we had a detail inspection line item in the salary. That was to, you know, we would have firefighters come in and help on the detail, for details and inspections. Those will be duties that will happen with this position once it's filled. So that $5,000 line item will be absorbed into that, into that salary, so that gives you a positive $5,000. But there's about 11,000 and change, almost 11,500, being allocated towards this position, and the other amount of money that's being allocated is coming out of the chief's pay. Here's a man who is not taking his contractual increase this year, who is making concessions in his own, from his own financial perspective to make this work. And I know he doesn't like talking about those things, but I'm pretty proud to have a man, person in leadership that will do things like that. He's done that in the past with no fanfare, and I'm just pretty proud of that. And I know he wouldn't want to talk about it, but that's the type of person you have running your fire department.
I'm glad you
Both
shared
of
that.
you. Thank you.
Bill?
About 20 years ago, I made a call to 9/11. I had an incident in my house, totally my fault. And I've often, over the years, wondered, it seemed like I no sooner turned around, and then you guys, and I don't know who it was at the time, but showed up at that. And now I know it was within 5 minutes. I'm thinking, was it 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes? But it did seem like 5 minutes for you guys were there, so, and took care of it.
Amazing.
Were you satisfied?
Oh, yeah, I mean, and the other thing that in thinking back on it, is that when you showed up, they had one guy with the axe, it was my shop, and he was ready to break down doors and windows and stuff, and I said, no, and I had a drawing showing what was wrong, and it's embarrassing to talk about it, but you listened to me, and you opened the door, you went in, you got the culprit out.
Oh, good, okay.
Now you're leaving us all in question.
One of the things.
All we need to know was his fault. That's
Yeah, what was the stupid thing Bill Duggan did?
One of the things that gets lost when we talked about the 5.9 minute average response time, that's 5.9 minutes average for a big red fire truck to show up. The chief, myself, were normally there well before that. And every one of you, whether you know it or not, has a firefighter that lives in close proximity to you. So in addition to the firefighters that come here to the station to grab the apparatus and respond with trucks, we have firefighters that go directly to the scene. So if you live down the street from me, Helen, and you had a call at your residence, I would show up within 2 minutes at your house. And I would be able to do things like a scene size up, be able to take command, I would be able to do evacuations, all those things that the first-in companies would have to do. We can take care of that in 2 minutes.
You have always been amazing.
So it's just the way we manage and the way we set up. And the reason other systems fail is because this is so labor intensive that most chiefs walk away from it. I'm serious.
Correct.
If you saw what went, and again, I'm not, but if you saw what went into it, you would say, why would I want to do this every day? Because it's craziness. It's very, very labor intensive. But when you manage properly and you love what you do, which we do, and all of our firefighters do, it works. It's a philosophy. And you have to manage for it, and you have to care about it, and you have to want to belong to the community, and do all those things. When one of those things falls off, it goes away. And then you pay $4 million to put, so Plymouth, a neighboring community just put,
We need an edit.
they just put 2 full-time firefighters on duty and 2 part-time firefighters on duty, and their budget dwarfs ours now,
Yep.
with 2 on duty. So when the ambulance goes out the door, those 2 are already off on the ambulance. Where's your fire protection?
Right.
They call us. With us, with a separate EMS service, in a fire department with 2 services that runs, neck and neck, side by side, you couldn't get a better,
No.
you just can't get a better system. I'm convinced of it.
No, you're right.
And I guess if you ask Chief Weston, our philosophy is as long as he and I work for the town, that will be our goal, is to perpetuate this system in as long as we can, because of, again, you wear two hats. You wear your administration hat and you wear your taxpayer hat. When your taxpayer's hat's on, you smile because you know you're doing the best that you very can. You're doing the very best job you can with a very minimal amount of money that you can, and we're proud. And that's, I mean, that's it in a nutshell for me. So, sorry, I didn't mean to keep talking.
But you deserve to be proud.
Yeah, I just to kind of reiterate, one time we brought the chief before us to talk about the whole setup on the on-call firemen and the locations of the 3 fire stations, because we were questioning costs. And he showed us the whole, plan, and like almost like a map that shows the locations and the guys that live around it. And we saw it, and it looked good, but do you really believe that's working? And, but in the past 5 years, I saw it twice in my neighborhood. So
Yep.
it was like, all of a sudden, bang, you guys are there, so it works. Congratulations. Getting back to salaries, though, mainly the biggest, change, I guess, between years. I guess this might be more of a question for the town administrator. So we do have a new position, which is the assistant deputy chief, and that's a half-year position.
Correct.
So it'll be 70,000.
Full-time, but just funded for half a year. Next
But-
year, we'll have to fund that for the full year, just for full disclosure.
But we have a 23% increase in the deputy chief's salary.
Yep.
And I guess my only question would be is, do you have a job description that says the previous role was this, the new role was this, with additional responsibilities, that kind of play into that significant increase, or is it more related to a change in step grades?
Neither. It's no additional change in responsibilities, performance, et cetera. It's just accurately accounting for the cost of the position. It was put in that line item as a 35-hour position. The additional 5 hours were funded in another line item, plus some additional work that was done. So again, as I mentioned before, there's no net increase in the actual value of that, but beyond your typical step raise. It's just that we're trying to be more transparent in the budget process.
Well, that's why I'm seeing my next question was seeing a decrease in the dispatcher's line there. So that's where it was before?
And some of the overtime in the dispatcher was there, yes.
And so is the,
Because that was an overtime category.
and I think the prior positioning included overtime. Before, when we had a assistant deputy chief, I think in prior years, was overtime a component of that position as well?
Not in that line item. It was budgeted elsewhere.
Still elsewhere. But this new position of deputy chief, it doesn't include overtime. It's not an
So-
overtime position.
So we have the deputy chief, which
Yep.
is right here, and then we're creating this new assistant deputy chief.
Separately, I
which
see
is
that.
funded for a half a year. And that's funded at a 40-hour week for half a year. As it relates to overtime for that position, I know I've discussed this with the chief, I know it's in the budget, I just can't identify where it is as you're asking me that question, but I'll get back to you on that.
Okay. Thank you.
If there are
I can speak to it.
no further questions, then thank you. Appreciate you coming in today,
Thank you, everyone.
and spending the time with us.
Thank you.
And appreciate you.
Also, Chief, to say hi to Mickey for us.
I will. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're gonna dispense with our 15-minute break. Let's take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll return and get back at it.